Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 10-minute round. This episode, we will be recapping everything that happened this weekend at UFC 305 from Perth, Australia. I'm going to kind of do a little rapid fire on the main card, and we're going to spend the bulk of the episode on the main event. Before we get into it, I do want to say that if you watched my last video, it turns out that I was right about a lot of things, about how the fights were going to play out. I'm not going to harp on that too much. I'm going to be real humble about it. I'm not going to do something like cut away to the points that I was making in the last episode. Not going to like put them in black and white and kind of just, it would be really petty of me to do that. So definitely not going to do that. Let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about Jingliang versus Carlos Prates. So in this fight, Carlos Prates came in, kind of did what he's going to do, was really patient. I was really impressed with how patient he was with his striking. He was never chasing the KO. And at minus 150, I said in the last video, that's a really attractive price to get him at for the knockout. It was almost a guaranteed thing. Minus 150 on a guy who's knocked out a lot of people.
The leech has a big ass head. It's a big ass target.
So what's next for Carlos? I feel like he's one of those guys where I'm hoping the UFC is going to slow roll him a little bit. He's definitely going to get some favorable matchups. He's not going to face any dominant wrestlers anytime soon because his grappling is still a little suspect. But he's definitely a guy that could turn into a star. He's probably going to get showcased in a lot of future cards. He's probably only one or two fights away from getting a main event, especially if he keeps knocking guys out. It's bound to happen. The dude likes to knock people out and rip cigs afterwards. It's pretty marketable. Now we're going to talk about Tuivasa versus the biggie boy, Jarzinho Rosenstruik. So I did say in my previous video that I didn't really like this matchup for Tai. I don't think that Tuivasa has evolved in his time in the UFC. He's an athletic dude. He's big. He hits hard. He goes in hunting for the knockout. He's not really setting up the knockout. And, maybe I would have made a point that Jarzinho was a little cleaner than Tai.
He's kind of a cleaner striker than Tai.
For Jarzinho Rosenstruik, I'd like to see maybe a matchup against the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. I don't think they've fought each other yet. For Tai, he definitely has to change something up as far as his game is concerned. If he wants to stick around in, as far as the top heavyweight or even just in the UFC at all, something has to change because, everybody's kind of figured out his game by now. Dan Hooker versus Mateusz Gamrot. I do think that this was a classic Mateusz Gamrot style fight where he's going to bring the pressure. Dan and the City Kickboxing guys countered that by bringing the pressure back to him, by constantly backing him up on the feet, kind of doing damage at a plus 250 underdog. If only somebody would have had like the foresight to take a chance. He was at home. Maybe he was going to get a little bit of a home-cooked decision. He might be able to maybe not put him away, but he might do enough damage to kind of mitigate like the moments where he's fighting off of his back or he's fighting off the grappling to
kind of take a decision at home.
For Dan Hooker, this was a big moment for him, a big win in the flyweight division for him, a big win at home. He was able to get the job done as a pretty significant underdog. I think I saw somewhere that he is potentially going to get a matchup against Charles Oliveira in the near future, so that's a really exciting fight. I would definitely look forward to that one. Next fight on the card was the co-main event, Kai Kara-France versus Steve Erceg. This was also another City Kickboxing guy pulling out a big win. Like I said in my previous video, we weren't really sure where Steve Erceg lands in the flyweight division. He did get a big step up in competition as far as getting the title shot. He was the right guy at the right time to get that title shot, so we're not really sure kind of where he lands in the top 10. It'll become more clear as he fights more guys. He was definitely doing a lot of stuff right in this fight. It's just that Kai is pretty good at fighting taller fighters. I think he's used to being the shorter guy. He's good at kind of throwing that extra shot, at the end of a combo, kind of how he did here. He landed, I believe it was a left hand, which was just kind of at the tail end of a combo, and Steve Erceg didn't really see it coming, and he caught him right on the chin. So for Kai, he might have put himself in a position where there's not a lot of guys kind of knocking on the door for the flyweight title at the moment. Amir Albazi is one, but he's constantly pulling out of fights, so he might have really put himself in a good position to rematch Alexander Pantoja, so we'll see if that goes down for him. Anyway, main event time. DDP versus Izzy Adesanya. Israel the Stylebender Adesanya. What is there to say about this one, man? DDP, it's not pretty. His style is not pretty. He does all the things that coaches tell you not to do as far as fighting, but he finds a way to make it effective. And the reason it might be effective is because it's so unorthodox. Like, you can't really find a sparring partner that does what DDP does. To find a sparring partner that does what DDP does, you'd have to go to a bar and wait till like closing time. Everybody's getting kicked out, and you just pull up on some random guy on the street, and maybe he might fight like DDP fights. And for a while there, I mean, as far as when I was watching it, I really thought Israel was starting to take over. It looked like, as always, it looked like DDP was gassed. It looked like the body shots were really taking a toll on him. And it felt like Izzy, had taken over the fight. And then in just DDP fashion, he's like, oh, I'm losing? Let me just go ahead and do this thing where I'm going to fall on you and I'm just going to win the fight. And it worked out in his favor. And he is now the first middleweight to defend the belt, I think, in the past 2 years. So good on him. He's got a fight against Sean Strickland coming up. After that, if that Robert Whittaker and Khamzat fight actually does happen, he might even have the next guy lined up. So let's kind of slow the talks a little bit about going up to 205 to fight Alex Pereira. For Israel, where does he go from here? He is 35 years old. Kind of looked like he was going to retire in the cage. He had taken the gloves off. He hit the old Wolf of Wall Street quote, he's not fucking leaving. But as of right now, there's not really a whole lot of attractive matchups at middleweight for him. There's not, he's beat most of the elite middleweights. The only guy that I could really see myself getting excited about is maybe a potential matchup against Khamzat, but a lot has to happen for that matchup to come to fruition, so I don't think it's one that we see anytime soon. I think that at his age, his time at the top of the middleweight division is done. I still think he's too small for 205. There is an argument to be made that maybe he has enough name value to go up to 205 and challenge Alex Pereira for the 205 belt, but being 1-3 in your last 4 fights, it's going to be a hard sell, man. It's hard to stay on top in this sport. It's hard. Even somebody as skilled as Israel Adesanya, like, it's tough to stay on top. And so I think maybe that is kind of the last of his dominance, We probably saw the end of it. So I hope he still has some fun fights ahead of him. I hope he can, ride off into the sunset sooner rather than later. But who knows what's next for the Stylebender. That's it for this episode. This has been the 10-minute round. I will catch you guys on the next one. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. You know how YouTube works. I don't have to tell you. So thanks.